The committee will come to order without objection. The committee may recess at any point. I'd like to go ahead and welcome everyone back to the full committee, and I recognize myself for an opening statement. Good morning, Secretary Mayorkas. Thanks for joining the committee. We look forward to hearing from you as we discuss the department's budget and the crisis this administration has created at our southwest border. This year, we recognize the department's 20th anniversary and thank the many public servants, past and present, who have worked tirelessly to keep our homeland safe. In the aftermath of 9/11, the department was created to safeguard the American people. This mission includes securing the U.S. borders and approaches. Mr. Secretary, you took an oath where you swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office. Your job is to protect the homeland. And one of those obvious duties is to secure the United States sovereign borders and to implement the laws duly passed by Congress. However, you have not secured our borders, Mr. Secretary, and I believe you've done so intentionally. There is no other explanation for the systematic dismantling and transformation of our border into a lawless and dangerous open border. You've asserted in the past that it's an issue of resources, but the numbers show a very different story. In just the 2 years of your tenure, more people have crossed our southern border into the United States than the previous 12 years of 2 administrations combined. Did the budget suddenly decrease and result in this massive surge? No. Did the number of Border Patrol agents suddenly get cut in January of 2021? No. What got cut were 89 effective policies. As Chief Ortiz told us in our hearing in McAllen, Texas, we don't have a resource crisis, we have a policy crisis. We will fulfill our obligation to the American people and our oath to the Constitution. Secretary Mayorkas, need I remind you that Congress makes the laws and the executive branch is obligated to follow those laws? Apparently, the answer to that question is yes, because since you've become secretary, you've disregarded the laws written by this branch of government, laws passed by both Republicans and Democrats. Behind me, you can see a list of the ways you've made our border and our country less secure. You intentionally ended all construction of and contracts to build the border wall system. You attempted to terminate the migrant protection protocols, remain in Mexico policy, and when these efforts failed you, refused to fully enforce the policy. You illegally and without congressional approval created mass parole programs for countries like Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, and expanded the use of the CBP-1 app to facilitate these programs. This is ultimately playing a shell game, Mr. Secretary, wherein those who would otherwise come illegally with no justification for entry now get to enter under the pretense of legality. You lowered the credible fear standards, so even illegal border crossers who've broken the laws of the United States can claim asylum despite knowing that 9 out of 10 claims will be found illegitimate. You instructed ICE agents not to detain or deport the vast majority of individuals illegally in the country, while also stating that the crime of being in the country illegally is by itself no longer grounds for removal. You just made that up. You refused to detain illegal aliens pursuant to the Immigration and Nationality Act and instead allowed them to be processed en masse into the United States. You moved northern border agents to the southwestern border, leaving our northern border vulnerable, which has led to an increase in encounters in some sectors as much as 900%. And finally, you ended Title 42 in May without any plan to deal with the surge. What's this gotten us? Well, here behind me, you can see the results. Unfortunately, the facts are overwhelming. More than 5 million encounters at the southwest border since President Biden took office. 1.4 million gotaways, known gotaways, who evaded U.S. Border Patrol agents since President Biden took office. And these are only the ones we know about. We learned from U.S. Border Patrol Chief Ortiz that these numbers are likely 20% higher. 80 individuals on the terrorist watch list have crossed the southwest border so far in FY23. 14,148 pounds of fentanyl seized in 23, enough to kill the entire U.S. population. The U.S. population you swore to defend and protect over 9.5 times. And this is only the amount we know about. We have no idea how much of this poison is actually being brought into the country by drug smugglers taking advantage of our porous border and your lax policies. Last month, this committee held a hearing in McAllen where Chief Ortiz stated under oath that DHS does not have the operational control of our borders, contradicting testimony that you previously gave before this committee. Chief Ortiz went on to say that 5 of our 9 sectors of our southwest border are under the control of the drug cartels. Unimaginable. Secretary Mayorkas, your reckless border policies are enriching the drug cartels, and these cartels are laughing in our face. They find it amusing that the most powerful nation on earth is not only unwilling to stop them, but is actively facilitating their business model. Unfortunately, your admission during the March 28, 23 Senate Judiciary hearing that you're unaware that cartels are using illegal aliens as decoys to distract Border Patrol agents while they smuggle illicit contraband and illegal aliens across the border only emboldens these cartels. Honestly, your admission reflects incompetence. Imagine a general officer in the Army who has no clue about the strategy of his enemy. We'd fire that general on the spot. Mr. Secretary, every time you fail to acknowledge that this is a crisis, you lose even more credibility with the men and women of DHS, to say nothing of the American people. As you ignore the crisis at our border, thousands of Border Patrol agents and CBP officers are on the front lines, putting their lives at risk to keep our country safe. And what kind of treatment do they receive from you? They're accused of whipping migrants crossing the border. And now we find out that your department knew the whole time that this report was bogus. You went on national television and vilified these agents of the Horse Patrol Unit. These men and women are proud to fulfill their duty to secure our border, and they do this with no thanks, no support, and quite honestly, dishonesty from this administration. It's downright shameful. I don't blame our Border Patrol agents for feeling the way they do about you. As a former Army officer and doctor and CEO, I know that when a leader loses the trust of those he's entrusted to command and serve, it's over. Now, let's turn our attention to your budget proposal for DHS. Mr. Secretary, this budget proposal is an insult to every American. It fails to take seriously many of the most pressing national security threats, especially our wide open border. President Biden himself likes to quote, and I quote him, "Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value," end quote. Well, this budget clearly shows us what this administration values, and it's not the safety of the American people. Like your past budgets, like your policy decisions, and your actions, this proposed DHS budget has the singular purpose of continuing to encourage people to come into this country illegally. Here behind me, you can see this very clearly. Pet projects at the DHS, we're going to add $4 billion, but for CBP, we're going to cut their budget by $1.2 billion. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the folks that move people into the United States, we're going to give them another $1 billion. That's what you want to do. ICE, you're going to decrease by $421 million. This is all about moving people into the country and not about border security. The objective of this budget is not to secure our border, but to force CBP personnel to process illegal aliens into the interior of the United States. The proposed $4.7 billion Southwest Border Contingency Fund is just another gimmick to spend American taxpayer dollars on a crisis you created with the goal of processing illegal aliens quicker out of DHS custody so that you can settle them into the interior of our country. The administration's saying the quiet part out loud. By requesting funding for border management instead of border security, you're signaling you have no intention of securing our borders. Instead of spending any money on wall construction that would actually have both a practical and deterrent impact, the administration has proposed spending $3.9 billion of DHS money on a climate resilience program. Meanwhile, you propose spending a mere $40 million to combat fentanyl that's devastating our country. Do you think the parents and families who will continue to lose their children, their brothers, their sisters to fentanyl will take comfort in knowing that DHS has at least added more to the massive money already spent by this administration on climate change? I don't think so. Mr. Secretary, I could go on, but I will yield. I do hope you've come here today ready to be honest with the American people, because if you're bold enough to make these policy decisions, you should be brave enough to own up to them and their consequences. I will now yield to the ranking member for his opening statement.